The bell above the diner door barely made a sound when she pushed it open. That was intentional. She had waited until the lunch rush slowed down, until conversations turned softer and most eyes were fixed on phones or half-empty coffee cups. She slipped inside like someone borrowing space from the world, not wanting to disturb it. Her name was Elena, though nobody in that diner knew it. She wore a faded blue sweater that had been washed too many times and jeans that were carefully mended at the knees. Her hair was tied back in a low bun, not out of style but convenience. She carried a small backpack over one shoulder and held the hand of a little girl with wide, observant eyes. The little girl's name was Miriam. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her shoes were slightly too big, probably bought with the hope that she would grow into them. She walked quietly, matching her mother's careful steps. They chose the table nearest the window but furthest from everyone else. It was a strategic spot, close to the exit. Elena scanned the menu even though she had already counted the money in her pocket 3 times outside. She ordered one small bowl of soup and a glass of water. "For you and your daughter?" the waitress asked, glancing at Miriam. "Yes," Elena replied softly, "we'll share." The waitress nodded without judgment. She had seen this before. When the soup arrived, steam curled upward in delicate swirls. Miriam's eyes lit up, but she waited until her mother pushed the bowl closer to her. "Slowly," Elena whispered. Miriam took careful spoonfuls, her small hands steady but her hunger obvious. Elena pretended to sip more than she actually did. Most of the soup went to her daughter. At the table across from them sat a man in his mid-30s. His name was Daniel. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and had the kind of tired face that comes from long days and longer thoughts. A full plate of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and bread sat untouched in front of him. He had noticed them the moment they walked in. Not because they were loud. They weren't. It was the opposite. He noticed how quiet they were, how the little girl watched everything without asking for anything, how the mother counted coins under the table before calling the waitress over. Daniel tried not to stare. He focused on his plate, but when he finally picked up his fork he felt it, a pair of eyes. He looked up. Miriam wasn't staring at him. She was staring at his plate. Not boldly, not greedily, just curiously, like a child trying to understand how someone could have so much food in front of them. The moment Daniel met her eyes, she quickly looked away. Elena saw it too. Her face changed instantly. A mix of embarrassment and quiet panic crossed her features. She leaned toward her daughter and whispered something. Miriam nodded, her cheeks turning pink. They finished the soup in silence. Elena checked her phone even though she knew there were no new messages. She looked at the door. She looked at the empty bowl. Then she reached for her backpack. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. They stood up. They were going to leave quietly. Daniel watched them stand. Something in his chest tightened. He saw the way Elena avoided looking around, how she moved quickly but not hurriedly, like someone trying to disappear before being noticed too much. He saw the little girl glance one last time at his plate. He couldn't explain why it bothered him so deeply. Maybe it was because he remembered being that child once. His father had lost his job when he was 7. There were nights when dinner was toast and water. He remembered staring at other kids' lunchboxes at school, pretending not to be hungry. He pushed his plate away slightly. "Wait," he called out gently. Elena froze. Slowly she turned around. "Yes?" she asked, cautious but polite. I ordered too much," Daniel said, glancing at his plate. "And I hate wasting food. Would you mind helping me with it?" Elena's eyes flickered to the plate, then back to him. "That's very kind," she replied carefully, "but we're fine." Miriam looked up at her mother. She didn't speak, but her fingers tightened around Elena's hand. Daniel stood up. He picked up his plate and walked toward them. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. You'd actually be doing me a favor." The diner had grown quieter. A few people glanced over but quickly returned to their own meals. Elena hesitated. Pride wrestled with practicality. She didn't want pity. She didn't want charity disguised as kindness. But she also saw her daughter's hopeful eyes. "We don't have much time," Elena finally said. "Just a little." Daniel smiled softly. "That's all it takes." They sat back down. He divided the food onto a second plate that the waitress quietly brought over without being asked. The waitress gave Daniel a small nod of understanding. Miriam tried to eat slowly as she had been taught, but the first bite of chicken made her eyes widen in a way that broke something inside Daniel. It wasn't just hunger, it was surprise, like she hadn't expected food to taste that good. Elena kept her posture straight, her movements controlled. She only took small portions, ensuring most of it went to her daughter. "You don't have to pretend you're not hungry," Daniel said gently. She gave a faint smile. "Mothers get used to it." There was no bitterness in her voice, just truth. "What's her name?" he asked. "Miriam." He nodded. "Hi, Miriam." She swallowed quickly. "Hi." They talked a little, nothing too personal. Elena mentioned they had recently moved. She was looking for work. Things had been complicated. Daniel didn't push. He didn't need details to understand. When the plates were nearly empty, Miriam leaned back in her chair, satisfied, truly satisfied. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a few folded bills. "For the food," she said firmly. Daniel shook his head. "No." "Yes," she insisted. "We don't take without giving something." He paused, respecting her dignity. "Then let me make a deal," he said. "You keep that money, use it for something she needs, and next time you see someone who needs help, you pass it on." Elena studied him for a long moment. "That's not a deal," she said softly. "That's trust." He nodded. "Exactly." After a moment, she put the money back in her bag. "Thank you," she said, not just politely but sincerely. When they stood up this time, they weren't trying to disappear. As they reached the door, Daniel felt something unfinished lingering in the air. "Elena," he called gently. She turned again, surprised that he knew her name. She must have mentioned it without realizing. "There's a bookstore 2 blocks from here," he said. "They're hearing part-time help. My sister manages it." Elena's expression shifted from caution to cautious hope. "I can't promise anything," Daniel added quickly, "but I can call her, tell her you'll stop by." For a moment, Elena didn't speak. The diner noise faded around them. "Why?" she finally asked, not suspicious, just curious. Daniel glanced at Miriam. "Because she shouldn't have to learn how to look away from someone else's plate," he said quietly. "And because sometimes, someone noticing makes all the difference." Elena's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. "I was trying to leave quietly," she admitted. "I didn't want her to feel ashamed." "She shouldn't," Daniel replied, "and neither should you." The next afternoon, Elena walked into the bookstore. She wore the same blue sweater, freshly pressed. Miriam held her hand again, but this time her steps were lighter. Daniel's sister interviewed her. It wasn't a long conversation. It didn't need to be. Within an hour, Elena had a start date. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a lottery win or a dramatic rescue. It was steady hours, honest pay, a beginning. Weeks later, Daniel returned to the diner. He didn't expect to see them again. But there they were. Elena sat at the same window table, this time with 2 full plates in front of her and Miriam. There was even a slice of pie between them. Miriam spotted him first. Her face lit up. She waved enthusiastically. Daniel walked over smiling. "Looks like you ordered too much," he teased gently. Elena laughed, a sound that seemed new, like it hadn't been used in a while. "Maybe," she said. "Would you mind helping us with it?" He sat down. Miriam pushed the pie toward him. "We share," she said proudly. Daniel felt that same tightness in his chest, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was from witnessing something simple and powerful: dignity preserved, kindness accepted, and generosity returned. She had tried to leave quietly that day, but a little girl's eyes had spoken louder than words. And because someone chose to see instead of ignore, a small moment of hunger turned into a lasting change. Sometimes all it takes is noticing who's staring at your plate and choosing to do something about it.